The thing about camping is, everyone worries about bears, but it's the little critters that will really test your patience. I remember one night, up in the Adirondacks, sitting around the fire with a few friends, belly full of beans and cornbread, when the trouble started. We had taken all the usual precautions for bears: food sealed up, trash bag tied high on a branch, cookware scrubbed clean, and stacked far from camp. We were proud of ourselves, thinking we'd outsmarted anything on four legs. But the woods have a way of humbling you. Just past midnight, the sound of claws scratching and the rustle of leaves pulled me from my sleep. I shot upright, heart pounding, convinced it was a bear nosing around. I shook my buddy awake, and together we listened. The noise wasn't heavy though. It was quicker, lighter, like a thief darting, from shadow to shadow. I unzipped the tent as slow as I could, careful not to spook whatever was out there, and when I poked my head out, I didn't see a bear. Instead, I saw a fat squirrel, tail flicking, darting around like he owned the place. And not just one, two, then three. Little silhouettes against the moonlight, tearing into our snack bag we'd foolishly left under the picnic bench. At first, I laughed in relief. Squirrels, after all, aren't exactly dangerous. But then I saw the damage. Plastic ripped open, granola bars shredded, trail mix scattered like confetti. One of them even sat bold as brass, right on the bench, holding a peanut butter cracker in his tiny paws, staring me down like I was the intruder. My friend hissed, "Chase them off!" But when I stepped forward, they scattered only to regroup in the low branches above us, chattering in protest, like they were planning their next raid. The sound of them scolding from above was eerie, echoing through the still night, and I swear it set my nerves on edge more than the thought of a bear ever did. Bears you can scare with light or noise, but these little bandits, they were relentless. I stood guard the rest of the night, half expecting them to dive bomb us from the treetops. That's when it hit me. Out here, the real danger to your peace isn't always the big predators you fear. Sometimes it's the small, clever thieves who know exactly where your snacks are hidden. And I'll tell you, the memory of those squirrels' glowing eyes in the firelight still creeps into my mind when I hear rustling in the underbrush. Scariest part? I think they knew they'd won. By dawn, I was bleary-eyed, sitting on a log with a stick in my hand, like some kind of sentry who'd been outmatched by an army of bushy-tailed raiders. The fire had burned low, just a soft glow in the coals, and every so often I'd hear the faint scratch-scratch of claws on bark, followed by the flick of a tail in the branches above. My buddy finally crawled out of the tent, rubbed his eyes, and said, "Man, you look worse than if a bear had actually shown up." He wasn't wrong. We did a quick inventory and found half our snacks gone, jerky shredded into tiny strips, nuts scattered in the dirt, and the bag of marshmallows chewed through like someone had taken a tiny saw to it. I swear those squirrels had a sweet tooth to rival any kid at a campfire. We decided we couldn't let them win another night, so we started making plans. First, we gathered all the surviving food and hung it the proper way. Rope over a high branch, bag dangling in the middle. Only here's the thing. That trick works fine for bears, but squirrels? They treat it like a circus act. By midday, we were sitting at camp when one bold little guy scampered up the trunk, out along the branch, and dangled upside down, stretching with all his might toward our food bag. He almost made it too, until I yelled and threw a pine cone. He zipped back up the tree, like lightning, but not before chattering at me, scolding me in a voice that sounded suspiciously like laughter. Later that afternoon, we hiked down to the lake to fish, thinking maybe if we caught some trout, it'd make up for the ransacked snacks. The day was beautiful, sunlight sparkling on the water, loons calling across the ripples, a breeze carrying the scent of pine. For a while, I forgot about our midnight robbers. But when we returned to camp, the real horror set in. I don't know how they managed it, but the squirrels had gotten into our tent. One of us must have left the zipper halfway open, and those furry bandits had taken full advantage. Inside, we found cracker crumbs in our sleeping bags, a granola wrapper tucked in a boot, and, this is the part that still makes me shiver, a squirrel-sized hole chewed right through the mesh of the tent window. Now, a bear outside your tent is terrifying, sure, but the idea of waking up in the middle of the night with a squirrel running across your chest, carrying off your last Pop-Tart, that thought chilled me more than any set of glowing eyes in the woods. My buddy said it best, shaking his head while holding up a shredded bag of chips. You know, bears might scare you off once, but squirrels, they'll come back until you're out of food or out of patience. And judging by the mischievous little faces peeking at us from the branches, I had a feeling we were running low on both. That afternoon turned into a battle of wits, and let me tell you, squirrels are cleverer than you think. My buddy Tim came up with the first plan. He strung our food bag between two trees like a clothesline, high and tight, thinking the little devils couldn't tightrope walk across. 5 minutes later, we looked up to see one perched halfway across, tail flicking with glee as if to say, "Nice try, fellas." I lobbed a pine cone in frustration, and he dropped off, but not before snagging a cracker from a hole in the bag. Tim just groaned. We're fighting professionals. By evening, we decided brute force wasn't working. We needed strategy. So, we made camp less inviting. First, we set a ring of tin cups and pans around the food bag, hoping the noise would scare them if they tried to get close. Then Tim smeared a rope with leftover cooking oil, so they'd slide right off if they attempted their acrobat act again. I even tied a bandana like a scarecrow up in the tree, figuring maybe a hint of human presence would spook them. We stepped back, admired our handiwork, and felt pretty proud. "Bear-proof, squirrel-proof," Tim declared. But nightfall came, and so did the patter of tiny feet. We lay awake in our tent, listening. At first, silence, then a clink of tin, a scritch of claws on bark, and finally, the unmistakable sound of squeaky chattering, like laughter in the dark. I peeked through the mesh and caught sight of one squirrel dangling upside down again, this time testing the slick rope. He slipped, tumbled to the ground, and for a brief moment I thought we'd won. But then 3 more appeared, scampering along the tree trunk, working together like a gang of burglars. One batted at the pans to make them clatter, while another tried to chew through the rope itself. It was organized chaos, and I'll admit, my skin prickled with unease. They weren't just foraging, they were strategizing. Finally, in desperation, I leapt from the tent barefoot, waving my arms and shouting like a madman. The forest lit up with fleeing shadows, tails flicking in every direction. Tim followed me, brandishing a flashlight like a sword, and for a moment we stood there, triumphant, kings of our crumb-strewn campsite. But as we settled back into our sleeping bags, the woods fell silent, almost too silent, and I couldn't shake the feeling we hadn't seen the last of them. It wasn't fear of claws or teeth that kept me awake. It was the thought of dozens of little eyes glowing just beyond the firelight, waiting for the moment we dropped our guard. That's when it struck me. Bears come and go. They lumber in, sniff around, and leave if they don't find what they want. But squirrels, they linger, they scheme. And that, in the stillness of the night, is far more unsettling than a roar in the distance. Morning light didn't bring peace. It brought a battlefield. Our campsite looked like it had hosted a midnight carnival. Pans scattered, rope frayed, food bag gnawed to tatters. Even the scarecrow bandana hung limp and chewed, as if the squirrels had left us a calling card. Tim kicked at the dirt and muttered, "We're losing this war." He wasn't wrong. We had one bag of oatmeal left, a few battered apples, and the lingering scent of peanut butter clinging to everything like bait. That's when I remembered something my grandfather once told me. Critters don't fear strength. They fear persistence. Outstubborn them, and you'll win. So, we changed tactics. Instead of hiding the food, we set a trap of sorts. We built a small stand with branches, tied the last of our snacks inside an old coffee tin, and balanced it on top. Beneath it, we placed more pans, rocks, and even a boot or two, creating a noisy mess that would collapse if anything touched it. It wasn't elegant, but it was our last defense. The day passed without incident. We fished, gathered some wood, tried to laugh at ourselves, though every so often we caught sight of bushy tails flicking in the distance. They were watching, waiting. As dusk fell, we tightened every knot, stoked the fire high, and sat back to back like sentinels. I swear it felt less like camping and more like holding a fort under siege. Then it came, the sound of claws on bark, soft and steady, a chittering chorus from the treetops. One bold squirrel scurried down, hopped to the stand, and clang, the whole contraption collapsed. Pans rattled, rocks toppled. The tin clattered across the dirt. Startled, the squirrel bolted, chattering wildly. The others froze in the branches, and for a moment the forest fell into chaos. The noise had done what nothing else could, broken their confidence. Tim whooped like he'd just scared off a grizzly. "We did it! We actually did it!" We rebuilt the contraption 3 more times that night, each time with a little more flair. Extra pans, taller stacks of branches, even a few sharpened sticks pointing out like a fortress. Every time they tried, they triggered the clamor, and every time they fled a little quicker. By dawn, the trees were empty, and for the first time in days, we ate breakfast in peace. Just plain oatmeal, but it tasted like victory. Still, I couldn't shake the image of those squirrels pausing at the edge of camp, tails flicking in irritation, as if plotting their revenge for another season. And as silly as it sounds, I felt a shiver run down my spine. We'd won a battle, sure, but the war? I wasn't so sure. When we finally broke camp that last morning, there was a strange quiet in the woods. No chattering from the branches, no rustle of claws in the underbrush, just the steady drip of dew falling from pine needles and the distant call of a jay. Tim joked that maybe we'd scared them off for good, but I didn't believe it. As we packed, I kept catching glimpses of movement in the tree line, just quick flashes of fur, here and gone again, watching us leave. The hike back to the trailhead was lighter than the trek in, not because our packs were empty, but because our nerves had eased. We laughed about the siege of squirrels, mimicking their squeaky battle cries, and the clang of pans in the night. But deep down, I knew I'd never underestimate small things again. A bear is dangerous, yes, but it's straightforward. You see it, you act, it leaves. Squirrels? They're persistent, clever, and far too bold for their size. They taught me that out here, the fight isn't always against what you fear most. It's against what you dismiss as harmless. When we reached the car, Tim patted the hood and sighed. Well, at least bears don't hold grudges. I just shook my head, picturing those beady little eyes shining in the moonlight, the way they worked together like seasoned bandits. No, I said. Bears don't, but I'm not so sure about squirrels. We shared one last laugh, tossed our packs in the trunk, and drove away with the uneasy sense we'd left something unfinished. And here's the truth I carry with me to this day. Every camping trip since, when I tie off a food bag or stack a cooler, I don't think of bears first. I think of those relentless squirrels in the Adirondacks. The ones who taught me that the scariest camp raiders don't always roar. Sometimes they squeak. Sometimes they chatter. And sometimes they remind you that even the smallest thief can rob you of sleep, food, and peace of mind. So when someone asks me what scares me most in the woods, I just smile and say, bears, sure. But squirrels? Squirrels are scarier than bears sometimes. And then I poke at the fire, lean back, and wait for the sound of laughter, mixed with a shiver, because anyone who's camped long enough knows exactly what I mean.